All right, thank you everyone. We're so glad you're here today. This afternoon will be a panel discussion from 6 experts in the fields of education, juvenile justice, and community settings. Before we do that, please also ensure that you are all muted at all times, and feel free to drop your questions or comments into the Q&A or chat box at the bottom of your screen. There will be a question and answer at the end of this session. Please allow me to introduce our moderator for this panel. Today's moderator is Sujita Menon. Sujita is currently a risk assessment specialist at Change Happens, a nonprofit community organization in the 3rd Ward of Houston. She also works with students aged 14 to 19 by assessing their adverse childhood experiences and referring them to resources. She is also a 4th-year doctoral candidate at the Graduate College of Social Work at the University of Houston, focusing on the needs and experiences of justice-involved young women. I will turn the discussion over to Sujita.
Thank you so much, Ms. Ella, for a great introduction. And we are so excited to be here today. It's such a privilege and honor to have such a large panel of esteemed professionals from so many industries, especially the education, the nonprofits, the community, social work, and juvenile justice. So thank you, and thank you for joining us today. And please allow me to start by introducing this wonderful panel. We'll start first with Principal Alicia Lewis, and you can wave and tell everybody who you are. Thank you for being here with us today. Ms. Alicia Lewis is currently the principal of Blackshear Elementary for the past 6 years. She received her bachelor's degree of science in economics from UT Austin and a master's degree in educational administration from Lamar University. Together with scholars, staff, and community, Mrs. Lewis is working very hard to ensure that Blackshear Elementary is the A+ school of choice in Houston Independent School District in an A+ community, the 3rd Ward, Houston, Texas. Thank you again. I wish I had that clap sound to do, just welcome you here. The second panelist I'd like to introduce you to is Mr. Marvin Pierre. He is the founder and director of 8 Million Stories, which provides disconnected youth aged 14 to 18 an opportunity to complete their education by the way of getting a GED, obtain occupational skills training, and lastly, gain access to services to address their emotional and behavioral health needs. Mr. Pierre transitioned from a career on Wall Street to become an emerging leader who is passionate about creating sustainable social change for youth and undeserved communities. Welcome, Mr. Pierre. You can wave and tell everybody who you are. And I'm so excited to introduce you to Ms. Cecilia Garcia. Ms. Cecilia Garcia Lee is entering her 12th year at Communities in Schools of Houston and is the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Lead for CIS Houston. A big shout out to CIS for being one of our collaborators for this whole teen summit. Cecilia is responsible for all major events, corporate partnerships, alumni programs at CIS. She also actually started out at Milby High School as a case manager and then transitioned to development department as a special initiatives manager after a year. Thank you so much, Ms. Cecilia, for being here today. I'd love to introduce you to our, another panelist, Dr. Charles Lee. Dr. Charles Lee is an assistant professor at the University of Houston Graduate College of Social Work. He achieved his PhD from the University of California at Los Angeles, Department of Social Welfare. His research and scholarship investigates the intersectionality of race, ethnicity, class, gender in educational, correctional, and neighborhood context, and the impact these issues have on the health and well-being of young Black men and boys involved in the justice system. Thank you so much, Dr. Lee, for being with us today. I am so excited to also introduce you to Ms. Loretta Williams-Gurnell. Ms. Loretta founded the Super Lady Network, a group of committed thinkers, doers, and leaders committed to impact and change by benefiting the Super Girls Shine Foundation. This foundation increases the presence of more women and girls in STEM, innovation and leadership initiatives through mentorship, sponsorships, and scholarships. Loretta received her master's in education leadership from Central State University and was a research scholar at Cornell University. I'm so excited to introduce her to you, give a wave out and say that's who you are. She's got a wonderful backdrop with the Super Girl Shine Foundation behind her, and she's awesome at what she does. And I would, last but not least, is a very important person, Dr. Ashley Bennett. She is a co-leader and director of Community Culture of Accept, an advocacy group and community that centers racial justice in the college admission process and profession. She's also the director of college counseling at KIPP Sunnyside High School. Dr. Bennett received a doctorate in ethical leadership from the University of St. Thomas in 2020. Congratulations, where she researched the lived experiences of transgender students in high school. Thank you so much, Dr. Bennett, for being with us today. On behalf of Change Happens, Communities in Schools, and Crime Stoppers, we would really like to thank all of you for agreeing to be on this panel to discuss education equity. Also, before we start, I acknowledge that school is back in session, and I really want to acknowledge principals, teachers, social workers, everyone who's involved in the school system. I want to acknowledge you and tell you you are seen and you are heard. We see your struggles. We know how hard the transitions have been and the concerns you're facing, especially with health and learning of your students. I really want to give a shout out to you today as we discuss a very important topic on educational equity. So, you know, as we start school, it's really not simply about returning to normal, right? Everyone is talking about the new normal and what that looks like. You know, we're actually going through a transformation in how we do learning and teaching. A question I'd like to leave with all of you during this time of transition as well is if there's an opportunity in this moment of time to really develop a new normal where we can seize the opportunity to address issues of equity. Can we work to create something better in all our schools? You know, if we want all our kids to thrive and succeed, we have to move away from what we have always been doing and start to shift our paradigm to consider more possibilities to elevate equity for all. So this is where we are. We want to achieve that, but we know that there are deep and persistent disparities in academic achievement. Students of color are disproportionately represented in all levels of school discipline, even in the juvenile justice system. And this is a parallel. As we do research, we also see the parallel between that. As we discuss educational equity, I thought to come to a common definition and display a picture here on the screen for everyone. And we can talk about that a little bit so we have a common understanding of what we're talking about today. Can we pull up the slide, please? Haley? I am not sure why the screen is not pulling up. All right, well, that's okay. I'm going to show that screen again once it gets pulled up. Sometimes we have technological difficulties. And, oh, yeah, there we go. Thank you. All right, so as we look at this screen right now, you know, I very much wanted to show this because it kind of like describes a little bit about what we always talk about. So, you know, in this diagram, you know, it shows clearly when we treat everyone the same, we're trying to pursue equality. But we know that the kids with the greatest needs really do the least well. Some need more support, and we sometimes fail to see that some kids start out further ahead and some don't. They have families with high income, high levels of education, someone at home that helps with homework, they have a laptop, they go to summer camps, they have tutors. And some of the reasons why, these are some of the reasons why they might be ahead of other kids. So when we talk about education equity though, we're talking about actually eliminating these barriers. Some of the barriers at the end, you see the last picture, that actually get in the way of the achievements, their achievement. And so as we talk about that, and we can take away that slide. Thank you so much. My first question to all the panelists is, what are some of the barriers to learning that you have encountered for your students in your perspectives and in your own capacities? And we can really start, if we like, with those in the education sector who are actually seeing these issues apparent in your schools.
So I'll start. I think one of the biggest barriers are low expectations from adults. And that includes all of the adults that it takes to provide an education for a scholar, because it's not just teachers and educators, it's parents, it's community members, it's business partners who can provide funding, it's philanthropic funds. It's what do all of the adults expect for our kids. And when you talk about equity and you say giving a scholar what they need when they need it, you have to know the scholar and their background in order to figure out what they need and when they need it.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. You know, low expectations of our students and kids is a form of racial bias. You know, we internalized it and how we expect others to perform poorly because of, you know, potentially their race. And as you said, you know, equity is knowing exactly when the student needs whatever they need. So thank you for sharing that. Who else would like to go next?
I'll add to that. Thumbs up if you can hear me okay. Okay, perfect. Thank you. So thank you so much, Principal Alicia. One thing I will add is in this virtual environment, the gaps have become even wider in a lot of ways. Specifically, you know, I'm in the Sunnyside community, so I serve predominantly Black and Brown students, and a good number of those are in low income homes. And so that means lack of technological resources, be it laptops, phones, internet, having wireless internet at home, and even thinking, well, they could use their hotspots, but then that requires unlimited data and, you know, all of those challenges that exist. And then thinking about the home environment, I had a conversation with my husband not very long ago because, you know, I'm enjoying working from home in a lot of different ways because it's given me an opportunity to kind of slow down, connect with family and all those things. But home is not a safe space for all people. And so for students who are learning at home and that's not the best environment for them, that presents a huge barrier to their learning. Or if home is safe, but a lot of people live there. And so, you know, thinking about students who share rooms, who have to share laptops and all those things, and everyone is participating in online learning, are there enough supplies and all of those things? So while I think, you know, the barriers have always existed, it's really highlighted right now because we do have to slow down, be intentional, and look at our students and their needs. And I'm finding that my students' needs, though I've always known they were there, them being on campus with me helped bridge that gap. And now, you know, we're kind of in a helpless state in a lot of ways. So we can put technology in their hands, but still those other barriers, we can't do much about those at the moment.
Yeah, that well said. I think that was exactly what we were talking about, being in a new normal, right? Like this whole idea that technology has taken over our lives. And then, you know, I'll ask the question next really about what can we do about that? How can we seize this opportunity to kind of intervene, right? But you said something that just struck a point, was that we can provide them something, like we can give them a laptop, but we can't manage what they do with it, right? So it's just like teaching, it's like giving someone a fishing rod and say, go fish when they've never learned to fish. So, you know, thank you for sharing that. Yeah, let's keep this rolling. Who would like to go next?
I'll go ahead. This is Loretta Williams-Grinnell with Supergirl Shine Foundation. And my perspective is coming from the community partner aspect. And one of the things that I believe that we see as a community partner is I think the advantage, I'll say, is that we have team members who've been in education. And so that makes a difference when you say that you're going to be a community partner, because you understand the struggle, you understand the barrier, but you understand the politics and the expectations that come with education. And so that is I think that is the sweet spot of Supergirl Shine Foundation, is because we understand that first and foremost. And the barriers that we see are similar to what Dr. Ashley and Principal just said in reference to exposure and access. It's one thing to put a book in front of someone, but it's another thing to have the technology to be able to actually see what's in the book come alive. It's one thing to have the technology that's not obsolete, and then it's one thing to not have books that are obsolete. But depending on your zip code is going to determine what you have. Are the haves and the have-nots. But when you dig deep into whatever zip code and you start listening and assessing the needs of individuals and looking at them as humans, that becomes apparent. And then it does not become a barrier anymore. So I think the first thing is that what we have seen is by providing exposure and access, it has crippled the idea that girls in certain zip codes cannot do, cannot learn, cannot succeed, cannot become women leaders in STEM. And so we've just broken that barrier down and said, give them to us and we'll show you what they can become provided with the correct exposure and access.
Wow, I love that so much, Miss Loretta. What you brought up was really this, hope that we have, and also changing stereotypes, really changing the script and narrative of how we view our students. And even when you talk about zip codes, literature talks a lot about poverty and that being a risk factor and all of that. But then how can we break through all of that, So I love that, you created a really wonderful foundation to, elevate girls, in STEM, because, people never, really have this idea that we can imagine a woman in a STEM industry. But hey, I'm seeing a lot of women in the STEM industry now. And so things are changing. So we got to roll with the changes too, right? So thank you for sharing that for sure. And the exposure and access part, absolutely correct.
I think one of the things I think is also important when we look at barriers is ensuring that our schools, especially our most underserved schools and communities, have access to diverse, well-informed and experienced teachers who really have a firm understanding on how to serve the population that they're working with. I think oftentimes what you see is, we're onboarding teachers, we're giving them a crash course on where our kids come from, the challenges they come from, and we're assuming that that is enough to actually be able to serve a young person for a full academic year. And that's a huge disrespect to our students and their families, because a lot of our kids are coming to us with many significant barriers and challenges that are no fault of their own, right? They are born into some of these situations. And we as a city, in our school districts, we have not been intentional in terms of investing in providing the adequate resources that we need to really develop our teachers and also our leaders to actually do this work on the ground, right? It's really important that we start to look at, especially now that inequity is being more highlighted because of COVID-19, that we start to really do some deep dives in terms of like, what are our leaders doing in terms of how they're preparing their teachers to actually engage in this work? It's not just a 1 week workshop on here's our kids, here's the barriers and the deficit type of things that we often highlight to really validate our work, instead of really informing teachers about the brilliance that many of our kids bring to the space, right? Our kids are extremely bright, but we so often lead with this deficit mindset in education, especially when we're talking about Black and brown kids, that becomes the bias that people adopt, right? It's like, oh, you can't do it. And it goes back to what Principal Lewis was saying around this lack of high expectations, right? I work with disconnected youth that our school district said, we can't serve you anymore. And for me, the only way 8 Million Stories has been successful is because my mindset is totally opposite. I see the genius in all of them, right? It's because we as an organization have not been able to, or I guess a school district have not been able to find innovative ways to engage all of our kids who come to us with various different types of needs and also skill sets that, in a traditional school setting, historically, there's no space for it, right? So we're expecting kids to sit still all day. And if they bounce around, oh, you're sped. Oh, you're on the sped spectrum because something's wrong with you. That's not normal behavior. But in fact, this kid is extremely brilliant when you look at his test scores, but because he can't sit still and be focused in the class, oh, let's push him out, not to GT or say, are we rigorous enough for this young person, and say, no, he has a problem, especially our Black boys, right? Our Black boys, oh, they're hyper, they're behavior problems, get rid of them. And so we need to really change that narrative, definitely locally here in Houston.
Absolutely, Mr. Pierre. That was well said. You brought out all the words that was in my heart, my mind, my mouth, everything. I'm really glad that you said that, because you work with a population that has, a lot of them have been pushed out and they go into the juvenile justice system, and this is the other trajectory, right? The other end where the school to prison pipeline is so well highlighted and talked about. And when you work so directly with them, you see that they come with so many generational trauma, generational issues, family situations that sometimes, it's unfortunate to say this, but our schools may not have enough resources to engage with and resources to be able to manage that. And, I was thinking a lot about the deficit mindset, and some things that y'all brought up was the mindset that, we as the helping and teaching professionals have of the people that we work with, right? The stereotypes and biases that we hold about the people that we work with. And you also talked about that, the deficit mindset and then the low expectations that comes with that. So Principal Lewis was like, I'm sure she was like, yes, this is exactly what it is. Did you want to say anything to that?
So I also wanted to, when he started talking about the teachers, and there are times when I have to tell my brand new teachers, so you're coming into a setting that we don't have time for you to, we have to rush this process for you because our kids cannot lose out while you're learning how to be a teacher, right? So then it makes it a situation where we're having to really seek out more experienced teachers who are already have that experience, so that when they come into my environment with my high expectations, and they already have high expectations, they can put into place the things that they need, and then we can teach them how to be in third ward Texas and how to ensure that my babies are performing higher than other schools around us that are more affluent. So getting that mindset of our scholars, just like everyone else. So our scholars are great, right? We're not going to look at them and say that they were created to be nothing. No, they were created for greatness. So all I have to do is pull that greatness out of you, right? All of those problem solving skills you have from living in poverty, living and having to adjust to being in the dark, having to adjust to not having food, having to adjust, all of those problem solving skills, there are affluent kids who cannot make those adjustments, right? So we have to teach our kids that you have some skills that other people don't have. And we just need to make sure that you take those skills and apply them to the academics. You have these street skills. We want to make sure that you can take all of that you have and apply that to academics and be a master scholar, because that's what we create, right? But you have to believe that in your bones. And when you're with your friends, you have to still have that, not just in this setting, but when you're not in front of the camera, when you're at home with your friends, do you still believe that about our Black and brown kids? Because if you do, then this is the place where you need to be. Okay, I'm getting excited.
No, that's exactly the passion we need to hear. This is coming from a principal who also manages like a whole school context. And so we really needed to hear that. So thank you so much, Principal. Yeah, let's hear from Cecilia, and Charles as well.
Yeah, I'd like to also point out a really important population, which is the immigrant population. And one of the things that we tend to, because of the environment, the school environment, the constant, coming and going, we don't really take the time out to actually acknowledge the trauma that they have already instilled, just coming from one country to to where we are, and the trauma that they have endured, regardless of how they got here, is something that we don't really address. And we know that our students have to go to school. They are, just as entitled to an education as everyone else. And I think it's just, trying to find a balance in providing resources and providing a safe space for immigrant students, immigrant families who can definitely, and possibly, educators, teachers, counselors, social workers who may have been immigrants themselves and know some of the challenges that they have faced throughout their education. And I just think that that is definitely a barrier that our brown community faces. And a lot of times it's dismissed, well, you're here, you have to adapt to the United States and the way of work here. And it's not just, from Latin America, it's from the Middle East, it's from Africa, it's from all over the world. So providing that safe space, providing the support for our immigrant families and students is also a barrier. And I hope to see more of that addressed, and places and agencies like Communities in Schools, where we do work with a very large, diverse population of immigrant children, students, and families, and something that we continue to, to support and to offer guidance, and of course, mental health for those who really need it. So I just wanted to point that out.
No, you're absolutely right. And I think that it's not really just like our immigrant kids, right? Immigrant kids are like, they have a whole lot of like acculturation issues that not many teachers don't even know about, actually. And so with that, and then we talk about our Black and brown kids, and just, we have to really embrace the differences of all our students. And that's why when we talk about equity, it's for all students, and just having a mindset that everyone is different, And how do we go at it in that perspective, right? And not have to like have the herd mentality where everybody's treated the same way. We can't do that. It will just be like that photo we saw, right? The first one, we think we're giving equal services, but it just doesn't work that way, right? Yeah, I'm sorry, Charles. I saw that you wanted to say something.
Oh no, it's okay. I think, well, everyone has kind of touched on a lot of things. I think one thing that I was thinking a lot about is just young people who've been pushed out of school and into the justice system. And really thinking about a huge barrier is just the lack of coordination among correctional or juvenile justice facilities and educational institutions. Mostly just because these young people are likely going to return back to school at some point. But we know that many face, a lot of educational discrimination when they try to re-enroll or they're re-enrolled in the middle of the school year and expected to perform at the same rate as young people who've been there the whole time. And so through that, the coordination or among these two different systems and how young people can be supported in that the school reentry process, or what are the key supports that need to be in there. But they serve as barriers because, again, some of these young people end up not re-enrolling into school because of these barriers and challenges, or they're pushed into other punitive settings, that mimic, a lot of the things that they've experienced in traditional school settings as well. And so really those things, I see a lot of these system related policies and practices serving as a huge barrier to learning, especially for young people who've been involved in the justice system.
No, thank you so much for sharing that. I think you and Marvin have a similarity with that, thinking, as you expressed about the school to prison pipeline, and you see the end of the kids at the back end, and how are they getting inch closer to equity, right? Like how are they getting the resources they need? How are they getting the teaching and learning that they really need? And a lot of them have already lost out time. When they go to the juvenile justice system, they are losing out time in the classroom. And this is a whole new equity issue that it is not explored in the mainstream education, unfortunately. And so I think you bring up a good point about the systems that have to play a role, and re-entry support and coordination that needs to really buffer the impact that they have faced already, and just try and elevate them as much as possible. Did anyone want to respond to that?
I do. This is Loretta Williams-Grinnell again. It's not necessarily responding to the prison, the pipeline, or reentry, but it's more of the mindset that we can be mentally also in prison. And depending on, I want to go back to the zip codes, because this is what we see in our organization, is that if a girl comes from an affluent or more middle class zip code, it is said that she has resources, or it is said that she has access, or it's said that she has exposure, and that's not necessarily true. And so I think we have to be careful, and it goes back to what Principal Alicia said, and I was sitting here taking copious notes, because my heart is around new teachers, and my heart is around how do we not stifle the energy, the experience, the energy, the excitement, and the skill set of new teachers, and place them in an environment when after 2 to 3 years, they're ready to leave, maybe within the first 6 months, because they are not adequately trained. It's on the job training. And so I was speaking with a principal, one of our community partners of this, and one of the ideas is literally having and this goes around mindset, but having a mastermind group with seasoned veteran as well as new energized teachers. And the reason why is because if I'm seasoned, I'm a veteran, I might be stifled in my thinking, right? I may need to be encouraged and inspired to come off of paper and pencil and use technology. That's a barrier in a classroom, because if I think that I can't learn anything new, how are you teaching that they can learn something new? And so then when I come in as a new teacher, I'm excited, I'm pumped, I have my degree, I'm ready to go, but I don't have the experience. I may have the skills in reference to teaching or in my particular content where there's science, but I need to come in and observe, but I don't have time to. I don't have time to get that real mentor where I can shadow. But I can do it if it's a collective administrative, and it sounds like Principal Alicia is that type of administrator, where you gel the seasoned and the new so that you can break down those barriers. And then also, we have to, I think, as educators, and I'm coming from the community perspective, but when I was in education, educators need to go through trauma training so that they are not triggering and using certain words and jargons and what is it? It's sarcasm that actually is maybe stirring up some things that depresses or re-triggers things that the children, students are hearing from home. It should be a safe place. And I'll leave you with this. When we're talking about barriers and women, and particularly putting more women and girls in STEM, women like men should try to do possible. And when they fail, their failure should not be a challenge to others. Let me say that again. Women like men should try to do the impossible. How many teachers are encouraging our girls to do the impossible? That was a pregnant pause on purpose. And when they fail, failure should not be a challenge to others. So why is it when a girl fails, it becomes a barrier? But when a boy fails, it becomes strength. And as educators, children spend more time in the school system than they do at home. So I'm spending more time with my teachers. So what my teachers say and share with me, how they build me, how they don't build, how they don't expose, provide access, has a lot to do how I'm going to thrive as a person in that school and with my confidence outside of the school. So I think that when we talk, that could be any demographic, whether that's prisoner pipeline, whether that's a zip code, whether that's female, whether that's male, that's all of that. We as the adults, we have to help break down those barriers too and bring new talent with the veteran so that we can get some real good education going on in the classroom, especially in the areas of technology. That's all I want to share.
I also wanted to make one comment about what Dr. Lee said about children when they come back to school and they're, it's a barrier because of the way they're being treated. We also need to think about that when we think about our relationships with our parents. Some parents don't like to come to the school because they were treated poorly when they were in school, right? So you're coming from this economic disadvantage, you were treated poorly. So now here I am coming to fight for my child, but I still have this trauma from when I was younger. And so we need to also, that really just made me think about that, because we need to make our parents feel comfortable, feel welcomed, that we understand them, because we need them in order to make sure that that child feels a certain way about school. So if the parent is going home saying the school is a horrible place, whatever, then the child is looking at the teacher like, my mama don't even like you. So why would I listen to you? So I really think the relationship with the parents, and I am just gonna say this, like this pandemic has brought us closer to our parents than ever before, right? Because it's not about coming to the school, it's about communicating with them. Literally, my goal for this year was to have 100% of my parents have my cell phone number. Having my cell phone number allows them to get in touch with me at any time of the evening, and I'm in the grocery store and we're talking. That is huge, y'all. Like, it has just made such a difference in my community and getting our parents involved. We need them, but we don't want to make a barrier for them, just like these scholars who have made a mistake, who have failed, who need to be learning from that failure, are coming back in and not being treated well. We need to love our community, love our kids. And I know it's hard sometimes, because don't get me wrong, there are sometimes I'm like, now wait a minute. But even beyond that, you do have to like bring yourself back together, because it takes all of us working together. And again, Third Ward is the best place to be. Y'all know I love Change Happens and everybody else. They have done so much to make sure that every one of our scholars have technology, hotspots and everything, but it's literally like that Third Ward, Change Happens, U of H, the community coming together to embrace our children. So y'all, we have to remember the relationships. They are everything for our babies and our parents.
Absolutely, you said that right. So this is like what we call the whole community concept, right? We're talking about not just working in isolation with just a student. You got to involve their parents. You got to think about what resources you can get from the community you know, and also change happens. We are very grateful that Comerica Bank came in and stepped in to provide funds for us to provide laptops to your school, Principal Alicia, and the students. Honestly, like, this is where, you know, the whole community is involved. You know, we have to really be willing to go out there and seek help for our students as well. You know, sometimes we think that we're I mean, everything that I'm hearing today, we started off talking about the barriers that students themselves have, and then we went to the systems problems, right? We're talking about the administrative issues, the teachers that are working with the students. Are they trained? Do they have trauma-informed training? Do they, you know how to work with parents? How are they welcoming the parents in the buildings? You know, we talked about, we just literally have moved, and I think that you have hit the nail on the head, because I do see the big role that we have to play. Right. And so my next question, and the last question I have, actually, because you've also already covered like what can we do to eliminate these barriers, right? So my last question, and I would like very much for this to be an action-oriented webinar as well, because I would like for our teachers, social workers, and everyone attending this webinar today to go home with an action step that you can take, that you can do when you go back to your settings, right? So help me, panelists, and just help me with, you know, talking about what are some practical steps, right, that our teachers, social workers, anybody who's working with students, what are some of the practical preliminary steps that they can do and they can take to work towards education equity?
I'm gonna go ahead and jump on this one because it's an area of passion of mine. So first, I think we start at the top, and we need to look at our administrators or our decision makers, look around that table and see what they look like. Do they look like the students they are serving? By and large, the answer is no, particularly in communities that are more diverse. And y'all, I can go off on a tangent about the word diversity and how it makes me tired, but we don't have time today. But as we look around the table and then we look at our students, if we don't see some similarities, we will always miss it. We will miss the opportunity to serve our students well because we don't know where they're coming from. And we don't understand how to serve them if we're not asking them. So if you are in a current position, or if you're part of an administration that is homogenous and doesn't look like your community, you can't fix it overnight, right? We get it, budget, funding, all of those things. But what you can start by doing is polling your students, polling your families, because all these degrees don't add up to cultural competency. And so if we're looking at a group of homogenous folks who are not trained in the area of DEI work or cultural competency, we will miss the mark. And so I just caution everyone to exercise some humility. And while we all love our students, so we want the best for them, we don't always know how to do things in the best absolute possible way. So a temperature check, you know, check that room, check and see how you can be more inclusive. Check and see what our students need. Listen directly to them, to their parents. And so for me, I think oftentimes, especially as we're thinking about like the school board and the school district level, it can be very incestuous. And so I don't think we dig deep a lot of times to find highly qualified folks who check a few boxes. And moreover, we go with what's comfortable, what's familiar, what we've done before. And here we are in 2020, we're still having the same problems we were having 50 years ago in our schools. So we definitely need to shake it up. And I think it starts with the people at the top.
Thank you. That's well said. I think we just, and I'm just going to add in a humor part, but I think we just need more Principal Alicia's around. But you know, for real, right? Like, because you know, you are really an exception, right? You're an exceptional principal, and I can see you being here as well, wanting to, you know, influence the community, to be able to push the boundaries and go and be more inclusive and diverse in your work, right? So, and I want to say also that, you know, as you talked about cultural competency, sometimes it's very hard to achieve competency, right? You can never know enough of people and cultures, but I think you said that let's have some humility about that. And so I want to encourage us to start with cultural humility first, and then taking in whatever you can learn from, you know, what the people around you, right? Being open to hearing diverse thoughts and values and beliefs, and not just thinking that your value and belief is like the goal, right? The top. So thank you for sharing that. Let's hear from
I'm sorry. One more thing, Sajida. I typed it in the chat a while ago, but I meant to mention it.
Yes.
The cultural competency training, it needs to be recurring and mandatory. We should not be allowed the opportunity to opt out of something so important. So I just wanted to voice that over. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for saying that. Well,
Gita, I will share with on this particular one is because from a community partner lens, data is key, but data is queen. And so what we have decided that this year organization is really working with qualified social professionals who help us with the data and assessment. I'm speaking community partners. Social work has been very, very in our span, looking at the data, understanding what an assessment is, how you ask those questions. Because if you're a community partner, and I'm speaking from the outside looking in, it's with anything, you need to assess. But the first thing you have to do is you got to lean in. You have to be willing, you have to lean in. And then you have to listen intently and intentionally. We can use Principal Alicia as an example. In her community, she shared that she is successful because of community partnerships. It does take a village in order for her to be successful. There's no way in the world with the demographics, the socioeconomic barriers, that she would be able to be successful as a principal in that zip code without having community partners. And I think that's important. But I also think it's a responsibility of community partners to sit back and listen and make sure that you have the right services for the right community. And what I mean is you have to take time to look at the community specifically and lean in on that data. What we're doing is utilizing the data that we are learning from the populations and finding out what those needs are, but then also making sure that our programs are not stagnant and that they are not just cookie cutter. Population, that's socioeconomic, and we're not forgetting the parent. The parent, like she shared, the parents are vital to the success of our girls because we can give them the tools and all of that, but if they go back to chaos, they're not going to be able to thrive and to be able to shine, as we say, as a Supergirl. And so making sure that the resources are available to the family, to the village, then now, if I do have a hot spot, as Dr. Ashley said earlier, then I also, as a community partner, I also know that there are 5 people in the house using one computer because I've taken the time to do the assessment ahead of time versus putting a program on them and expecting an outcome which they cannot be successful for because we didn't have the data. And so the steps that I would say is if you are a community partner or a leader or wanting to work with schools and education, first thing is that you have to have viable programs that meet the needs of those that you are serving. And get clear on who you are serving. You can't serve everybody and expect to be successful. So you need to choose a particular target, audience, demographic, age, and really hone in on how am I going to dig deep to go wide. That's the first thing. The second thing is I need to listen to my education partners. They have enough to just educate, to show up to educate. So if we can be problem solvers, then now we can actually help those children that they are serving and that we are serving. Think about problem solving first. When you problem solve, now you can create these solutions to be able to build these programs, which builds the children, which builds the community, which builds our socioeconomics, which builds all of that. And the last thing I would say as a community partner is be willing to diversify not just your funding, but diversify your offerings so it meets in early on what those girls, I particularly, girls are going to come out of me, but what that population is asking or needing. So that means you have to take time and ask the girls or the boys, what is it that you want to see? Or what is it that you want to be able to expose to? What is it? Build the youth voice. So when you build a youth voice, then you're probably going to save time because you're not going to be doing programs that don't make sense and won't have the measurable outcomes that you want. And then also you build the trust and confidence in youth that they are going to start populating other peers and having that same voice in your community. And now the parents will come in, just like Principal Alicia said, in reference to there's a trust factor. And so those are the steps that we have made, or changes, I should say, we have made as a community partner, is one, assessing our data, two, looking at our programs, making sure that we are honed in on a specific target audience, lean in and listen first, and then assess what the needs are, and then problem solve.
Absolutely, that's really well said. And I know that's how Loretta and I connected, right? Because we were talking about data, we were talking about social work, and we we're figuring out how can we, strengthen what we have, right? So thank you for sharing that. Did Dr. Lee want to chime in as a researcher as well?
Yeah, I was just going to add, I think the pieces that Loretta were mentioning, I think a critical aspect of thinking about how to promote equity, specifically from my perspective, racial equity, is to engage in research practice partnerships. Educators and folks in schools are really focusing around teaching and learning. And so being able to then do research and use that research in a way to inform decisions about policies or practices can be daunting, especially when you're engaged in practice all the time. And so in a lot of my work, I do partnerships with school districts or with individual schools to help increase capacity around research, increase data literacy, and thinking about, both qualitative and qualitative data to be able to speak to the different interventions that may be employed to help to embed racial equity within school processes and structures, and learning from that process. But within that process of thinking of folks within schools, both young people and adults, as co-researchers. Research should be done collectively, not just from what academics or other researchers say is important. I think that, devising a research plan and questions and things together, I think are really, really important to ensuring that we're actually researching and identifying what's most meaningful and important to this particular context and the folks who are in this particular school. And so that's just, I guess, just to add on to all the different things that Loretta mentioned, just really trying to forge really sound partnerships to help facilitate that process.
Thank you so much, Charles, for saying that. Now we only have a couple of minutes left, and I want to hear from the rest of the panelists just on some practical tips that our attendees can take home with them today, that they can start practicing more education and racial equity.
So I'll say real quick, just get to know the people that you are serving. Real quick, go into your community. If you're a school, go into the community, go into the apartment complexes, go see the people. And I know we're in a pandemic right now, so we can't do all of that. We have to be safe, but when you're able to do it, you gotta get to know the people that you're serving. Not some of them, all of them, right? And get to know them on where you can build a relationship with them so that they can work with you to make it better for your kids. The other thing is, we really have to have a belief in our bones about what we're doing for children and then put it into action. Again, sometimes I say to my leadership team, so we can talk about this all day. What are we going to do, right? What are you going to put into action for our children to make sure that our Black and brown children are successful and get beyond the barriers? And let me just say, like, this picture behind me is my son. My son went to 5 different kindergartens because he got put out of every school that he was in, including my own school as a teacher. And we had to work together to get support for him. But me and his father are in education. So I had to become an advocate for other kids who don't have parents who are in education, who were like my son, because, I had to be the fighter for him and everyone else. We need people to advocate for our children, y'all, in education. And I'm in education, but we still need people to advocate for our children when they don't have people to advocate for them. But first, just get to know your children, your community.
That's good.
Get to know them.
Absolutely.
Get to know them. Don't be afraid of them. Because sometimes we get people in education, they're afraid of their own children. You cannot be afraid of the scholars that you are serving. And you cannot be afraid of their parents. So get to know your community.
Yeah, no, I really like what you said. And, just also taking, just following up from, what Ms. Loretta said, right? Like, we really need to listen, listen to what they're saying as well. Marvin, did you have anything to add? Cecilia, did you have anything to add before we wrap up?
I would just say, it doesn't take much for us to be disruptors of inequitable systems, right? And so as educators, we know what we're doing wrong in terms of how we're serving our kids, right? When we look at our discipline policies, we know we're suspending kids at a larger rate than, white children are being suspended. And we're okay with that. We're not speaking up. We're not putting the pressure on our leadership, as Ashley mentioned, to do something better, right? And, we're just turning a blind eye to it. And I think if we're really committed to equity and making sure all of our children have an opportunity to be successful in life, we need to start speaking up. And I think it doesn't require some sort of formal training to realize like there's some inequities in place, especially when we're talking about young boys of color. Like, we're not doing right by kids, and you don't have to be a rocket scientist to see that. So just really being bold enough and courageous enough to start to say we have to change and be disruptors of inequitable systems that limit the potential of our children.
Brilliant. Thank you for saying that. And Cecilia, did you want to end up, just wrap it all up for us?
Sure. I was thinking about something I heard not too long ago from a gentleman who does DEI work, and he made a really good analogy. He said, sometimes we have to rearrange the furniture in our home to make it work and to make it adaptable for others. And I believe that is something that we can start doing within our own community, even within our own social circles, our own networks, and not being afraid to sometimes be uncomfortable, because so many people that we interact with on a regular basis may not necessarily know what some of our own struggles have been. And sometimes by sharing, and those who are comfortable sharing, can bring a lot of knowledge to those who simply just have never really thought of it. And I think it's always good just to, to provide, again, I always go back to the safe space. In our agency, we have started monthly DEI dialogues with our staff. And it's for an hour once a month, and they're open to all of our staff. And I work with young adults, CIS alumni, 30 of them, and we started a book club right after the killing of Mr. Floyd. And we read Dr. Kendi's How to Be an Anti-Racist, which led to some big, broad conversations just overall with young adults. There's a lot of things that they just thought about one another just because they hang out and didn't really know. So I just believe, don't ignore those who have been through things, and there's knowledge. All of us have knowledge, and all of us have been through experiences, life experiences. And it's just really important to listen and to learn from each other. So that's what I would leave you all with.
Thank you. And that was a great ending to this. I do want to have y'all stay on for questions as well from the attendees, and just to let y'all take a deep breath, and for people to think of questions, I would like to invite our raffle team to come in right now to just do a raffle for our attendees who are here. So I'll give it to you guys. All right. So what do we?
So everyone should be seeing my screen, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so the first one, like I said earlier, is going to be for Dr. Dorian Williams' book called Strategic Planning for Black Folk. It's going to be super beneficial, especially for this group and all the great information that we have learned. All right, let's go ahead and do it. Hey, Linda Reyes. I hope I said your name right. Congratulations. Miss Lauren on the chat is going to be sending you a personal message to confirm your details. Congratulations. Next one is going to be for a Starbucks $10 gift card. Okay, so you're going to get you some free drink soonest. Let's do this. All right, Rachel, congratulations. All right, so that's all I have. Thank you all so much for being in this presentation, and over to you, Ms. Sajida.
Thank you so much, Ms. Osemene. That was the raffle team who has been going in and out of different groups and sessions, actually providing incentives to our students. We know incentives are so crucial, right, to keep people sustained. But as we come back to this, hopefully y'all had a breather and people had time to ask questions. I'm just going to try and, and congratulations to all the winners indeed. So I just want to go back and see if anybody had any questions for the team.
I have not seen any questions so far.
Okay, so let's just give a couple of minutes to see if anyone had any questions to pose, or if panelists during this time, if you feel like you've missed out saying something, We would love to definitely, you know, hear you out during this last 5 to 10 minutes. So Rachel said there were a few things I missed. You mentioned this may be shared on Facebook. So this session is recording, and I will do my best being put up on our Facebook Change Happens Facebook group. Please go ahead and like us on Facebook, and you get also updates on what we're doing, and also on our website. So hopefully that is possible. I'm not entirely sure, but I will make sure that it's up somewhere that you can access after today's session.
And just a reminder, if you are getting CEUs, the evaluation is a requirement for you. We would love feedback from everyone, but those signed in for CEUs, it is a requirement. We'll post the link in the chat a couple more times. Make sure everyone has signed in if you were here for both sessions. If you need the payment link, I can put that in the chat as well again. Thank you, everyone.
And also, Haley, remind me if I'm wrong, you have an evaluation form for everybody, right?
Yes, we have posted the evaluation form in the chat. Like I said, it's a requirement for CEUs, but we would love feedback. Even if you aren't getting CEUs today, we would love for you to fill out the evaluation form for us.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, so we'll wait again for anyone who has any questions. I've not seen any so far. It seems like we've covered everything. That seems hard to believe, but we definitely do have a great panel here today, and I know a lot of thoughts were covered. I did, as we wait, I did also want to share a last slide, and if Haley, you could put up the last slide on 3 things that we could first start to do, and also picking up from whatever our panelists have talked about today. But 3 different things that is a summary of what everybody has talked about. Are you able to share your screen, Haley?
Yeah, I'm trying to find it. I have it, but it's not showing me in my share options.
Gotcha.
Thanks, Ella.
All right. So yeah, if we can make this big screen. So there were 3 things that I actually want to talk about, and also everyone really has brought up these 3 things, and just some easy bite-sized stuff for us to think about. The first one really is that schools must actively counter racial stereotypes, biases, and assumptions. Assumptions of what your children or your students can achieve. And this ranges from whether or not they're talking about abilities, all the way to industries they can join, and what Loretta talked about in the STEM industry as well. The second point is that a child's race, class, or language should not predict or determine outcomes. And when I wrote that down, I was really thinking a lot about, we have a lot of students who may not speak English. We never really think about, what do we do about translation? What do we do about ensuring they still get the knowledge that they need? And this is very dear to me, because as we try to, so Change Happens has a lot of youth programs, and we do these programs free for schools. But this translation part is the hardest part that we're still trying to figure out what to do. So when we do sexual risk avoidance programs, which actually focus on healthy relationships, and also putting a plug out to anyone in this session who work with schools, and if you want these programs to be implemented for your students, please be in touch with us. If Haley, you could put our email addresses in there, and they can contact us, or the team Youth Summit email works as well. So just letting you guys know that, we have students that maybe speak Vietnamese, or speak Spanish is a common one, but they speak different languages, right? And recently I found that Zoom actually has a function for translation. And so we're trying to even figure out, how does that work? How does surveys which are only in English and Spanish usually work for those who know other languages? And so language is one big aspect, but your race as well, right? Like we talked a lot about stereotypes and all of that. And we know that the systems, the educators, the social workers, and everyone working in the school has a role to play to ensure that they are not blinded, right, by one's race, their class, or language. And the third one, and I love what Marvin talked about, be disruptors of inequity. Speak out when injustice is evident and children are denied the opportunity to learn, or children and students are being punished or disciplined for what it could actually really just be a trauma manifestation, or what could really just be a situation they're facing at home and bringing to school, trusting that the school is a safe place, but then it turns out that it's not. And so I think someone brought up about how we're bringing disservice sometimes to our students, right? And so I think as educators, as social workers, one of the things that we can think about is what is the role that we can play? What are some of my own biases that I have to check? What are some stereotypes that I have that are affecting my students today? And then when we see this injustice happening in front of our eyes, we cannot keep quiet. We cannot be quiet about it. And Principal Alicia talked about this. You know, we have to be advocates for those that are marginalized and are suffering and are not getting what they need. And so just ending this off with this last slide. I'm not seeing any questions in the chat group, which is a real surprise. But you know, we can be contacted if you in future as well. I'm going to leave my email address here if you like the opportunity to, you know, chat with any of our panelists or even ourselves. And like I said, we will put up this session, including the implicit bias training, and we have to ask for permission for that. But, you know, implicit bias trainings are critical, right? Let's get our teachers and educators the right training they need. Implicit bias, trauma, all sorts of the trainings that they need as a preliminary foundation. And then let's try and focus on mentoring them, right? Like we need to have more experienced educators or social workers mentoring those that are just entering the workforce and trying to make a difference. And let's also watch out for burnout. So Principal Lewis, you have all the parents having your phone numbers. I'm worried for you. I'm going to check in on you. And I'm going to make sure that you are okay as well, because we need to make sure that we are watching our own self-care so that we can keep going as well. And so I hope you have a great self-care plan with you. We appreciate you joining us on a Saturday morning, and we hope this has invigorated you and given you ideas on how you can take this on. And just, you know, take it from here and have a great weekend. Did y'all have anything else, room monitors?
Thank you. Thank you. This is awesome. All of the sessions today were really, really good. Thank you.
Just make sure you fill out the evaluation link, please, please, please. If you have any questions regarding CEUs, please stick around. I'll be here. You can post it in the chat and we can answer once everyone's done.
Thank you very much, Sujita, for extending the invitation. I appreciate you allowing this space to just share what we are doing in the community, for the community, and with the community through Supergirl Shine Foundation. And I'm very humbled to be able to share this panel with these esteemed scholars, and I believe that you all are doing great work, and it's good to be in great company.
Oh, thank you. You are giving us the opportunity to have you in this as well. So Change Happens is very privileged and honored to have all of you in our network, and we want to keep working with you because, you know, it takes a whole community, it takes a whole village, you know, to see our students succeed. So let's keep working together and let's not be strangers.
I just echo those sentiments. I really appreciate being invited to participate. It's been a great experience, even leading up to now. Just the email exchanges and the conversations have been fantastic. So I definitely feel honored, and it's great to connect with all of these new friends.
Oh, thank you. You know, Dr. Bennett was the first person who inspired me to do this, because she was in an equity panel before this and she just like blew my mind. And I told her, and we had a meeting with her, and I was like, we want to do this. What do you think? And so she helped really form and, you know, like develop those ideas. So I'm so appreciative of you.
I cut up a little bit more on that panel today.
You did cut up a lot more.
I kept it down.
Well, you know, everybody else added to those points though, right? So I think like it's you still got the main points in there. So. All right, still no questions. We will call this a day. So thank you once again, everybody, for being with us today and spending your Saturday afternoon with us. We look forward to continuing to connect with you, and all the best as you continue to raise education equity and racial equity in the classrooms, in the institutions that you work with. Let's all put our hands together to thank our panelists. And I know that we can't see everybody, but you know, thank you. And all right, have a great day.